Greetings and welcome to Analyzing Educational Research Week 6. We will continue this week with Chapter 6, Causation and Research Design. Week 6 Assignments. Watch Week 6 PowerPoint video. Complete Chapter 6 Review Problems. There is no Chapter 6 activity or reflection this week. Remember, the research resource assignment is due on October the 11th. And finally, read Chapter 7 and 8 from your textbook. Chapter 6 Snapshot. In this chapter, we will discuss a brief causal explanation, criteria for causal relationships, types of research designs, true and quasi-experimental designs, threats to validity in experimental designs, and non-experiments. Causal explanation. A cause is an explanation of some characteristic, attitude, or behavior of groups, individuals, or other entities or of events. Causal effect is when the variation in the hypothesized independent variable is followed by variation in the dependent variable, all things being equal. Ceteris paribus. Types of validity. The three types of validity as mentioned in Chapter 2 are measurement validity, which refers to whether the operational definition of a variable actually reflects the true theoretical meaning of a concept. External validity or generalizability, which refers to the generalizability of the study's findings to other situations and people. And internal validity or causality, which refers to the confidence we can place in the cause and effect relationship in a study. Criteria for causal relationships include association, an empirically measured association, also called correlation. An association exists when a variation in one variable is related to variation in another variable. Time order. The effect must come after its presumed cause. Time order exists when variation in the dependent variable occurred after the variation in the independent variable. Non-spurious or true or genuine association, not just coincidental. Mechanism. A causal or explanatory mechanism. A condition that creates the causal connection. This is done by figuring out how the process by which the independent variable influences the variation in the dependent variable. Context. Understanding of contextual factors such as when, for whom, and in what conditions does this effect occur. We understand a causal relationship much better when we have identified the conditions or context. The first three criteria are generally met in order to identify a causal effect. When the other two criteria are met, in addition to the first three causal explanations, can be considerably strengthened. Research design. Researchers usually start with a question, although some begin with a theory or strategy. If you are very systematic, the question is related to the theory and an appropriate strategy is chosen for research. Some research designs have higher internal validity than others. Research design. There are various research designs, but we will briefly discuss a select few in this video. In a cross-sectional research design, all of the data are collected at one point in time. In a cross-section, you can take a slice that cuts across the entire population under study. This design does not take into account the time order of effects. In a longitudinal research design, the author insists this type of research is always preferable over the cross-sectional design because data are collected that can be stored in time, and the values of cases of an independent variable and a dependent variable can be measured at different times. There are three types of longitudinal research. Trend. Studies collect data from different samples of the same population over time and is the easiest of the three. It is also known as a repeated cross-sectional design. Panel designs help us determine whether individuals in the population have changed and is the hardest of the three types of longitudinal research due to its expenses, attrition, and subject fatigue. The third and final type of longitudinal research design is cohort. In this design, data are collected from individuals or groups with a common starting point. The cohort design is also called an event-based design. We will continue with two different types of research designs, experimental and non-experimental. We will discuss two experimental designs. The first, true or classical experimental, and the second, quasi-experimental designs. We will also discuss three non-experimental designs, which are number 1, descriptive, number 2, correlational, and number 3, causal comparative designs. Experimental research designs are used to test cause and effect relationships between variables. True classical experimental designs are characterized by having two comparison groups, an experimental and control group, variation in the independent variable before assessment of changes in the dependent variable, random assignment to two or more comparison groups, and high internal validity or causality, and no or little external validity or generalizability. This diagram represents a pictorial view of a true experimental design where the intervention and control groups are randomly selected and given a pre-intervention such as a pre-test survey or observation. The intervention group is given the intervention, whereas the control group is not given an intervention. At the end of the intervention, a post-intervention such as post-test, survey, or observation is given. Quasi-experimental designs are similar to experimental research designs but lack random assignment of study participants. This diagram represents a pictorial view of a quasi-experimental design where the intervention and control groups are not randomly selected and are given a pre-intervention such as a pre-test, survey, or observation. The intervention group is given the intervention, whereas the control group is not given an intervention. At the end of the intervention, a post-intervention such as a post-test, survey, or observation is given. In experimental designs, there are several threats to internal validity. We will only discuss three major types of problems that arise in research designs: non-comparable, endogenous change, and treatment misidentification. Non-comparable groups occur when the experimental and control groups are not really comparable. This can arise with selection bias, when subjects and groups are initially different, or when subjects drop out of either group, which is considered mortality or attrition. Another threat to internal validity is endogenous change, which occurs when natural development in the subjects, independent of the intervention, account for some or all of the observed changes in the pre and post intervention or pre and post test. This can arise when you have maturation, when subjects age, gain experience, or grow in knowledge, or regression effects, when subjects with extreme scores move closer or regress toward the average. The final threat to internal validity we will discuss is treatment misidentification, whereby the subjects experience a treatment that wasn't intended by the researcher. This can arise due to experimenter effects, which causes changes among experimental subjects due to the positive expectancies of experiment staff who are delivering the treatment rather than to the treatment itself. Or the Hawthorne effect, when members of a treatment group change or act differently as a result of being part of an experiment. Non-experimental designs lack the manipulation of an independent variable, random assignment of participants to conditions, or both. They include descriptive designs, correlational designs, and causal comparative designs. Only one of these are mentioned in this chapter. Descriptive designs identify the characteristics of a phenomenon, describe the variable or variables under investigation, but do not examine relationships among variables. Correlational designs identify the significance of relationships between variables, may hint at, but cannot establish causality. Causal comparative designs, ex post facto, after the fact, focus on the collection and analysis of data on one independent variable for two or more groups. Consider, for example, studies on the effects of cigarette smoking.